Well, Brendan, first of all, I know that you were born in Los Angeles. At what point did you wind up here in Vegas?
My mother's doctor was in L.A. The family. So
Okay.
I'm born and raised in Vegas. My mother's mom, my grandmother, Ma, we called her, Ma, and my Nana, my great grandmother, lived in L.A. still, and that's where my mom's doctor was. So she actually went to California to give birth to me, and then 3 days old, I was heading back to Vegas. So
okay, all right.
I know my birth certificate says L.A., but I always claim born and raised.
All right. Well, Adam has always been brought up in the country. I mean, we live right down the road from cows.
So do I.
What was it like growing up here in Vegas?
This is what I get this question all the time.
Yeah.
And Adam grew up, you guys grew up, I grew up with cows. I grew up with just like any other town. The only difference was people go, "Oh wow, you were around the casinos."
Yeah.
That was Dad's business.
Yeah.
That was Grandpa's business. That just was Dad's business. To me, it was leave it to Beaver. Some people go to Dad's office. Dad's an accountant, and they go to Dad's office, and he's an accountant.
Yeah.
Well, I go to Dad's office, and it was in a casino. To me, it was no different. Back in the day, there's pictures of me at 4 years old sitting on a sports book counter at the Barbary Coast, giving out, actually taking money from customers, making sports bets. There's pictures of me at my dad's first casino, the Royal Inn Casino, of me sitting on blackjack tables that were open with people playing, and just sitting there while Dad was talking to friends, and he put me down, and I'm just sitting on the edge of a blackjack table. But to me, that was normal. Yeah. It didn't seem anything different because for me, that was just Dad's work. And I've always loved it. My family's always loved it. My grandfather, the gaming business is, the old adage of kindergarten, do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Well, my father and my grandfather passed away at 94 years old in 2014. He lived in the El Cortez still. My grandfather had dementia, so he didn't, but he was mobile, he was healthy, and he still went down and played cards every day. Hayden hoed people and, couldn't, he was a great man, but he loved what he did. My grandfather at 93 years old, Thanksgiving in Mexico, my great aunt sitting here, me sitting here, him sitting here, playing gin rummy with me, playing cribbage with her, and could track every card on both sides at the same time.
Wow.
Couldn't really verbalize much anymore, but he'd play my hand, put it down, pick up her hand, and would beat both of us at the same time. Wow. So they loved what they did. My father, I bark at him every day. I tell him to leave, and he won't leave. I'm trying to throw him out. It ain't working.
Now, you were a kicker in high school on the football team, and were evidently getting some pretty decent scholarship offers. But you hurt your ankle. What happened?
So hurt my hip. Ankles.
That was on Wikipedia.
Ankles don't count. Yeah. Well,
it was on Wikipedia, so it has to be true.
Absolutely. Understood.
It was on the internet.
So in high school, I was an All-American field goal kicker, but I didn't like it. I came from a family of linemen. My brother John, who's one of my heroes in life, he was number 62. And was a hell of a football player, all-state football player, and he was one of my heroes. And, my brothers were linemen, and my dad's a big man. We all played football, and I really, really hated being a field goal kicker. So I played wide receiver, running back, fullback, wide receiver, third-string quarterback, outside linebacker. I played when I was at Bishop Gorman High School is the high school I went to. Everybody nowadays knows it. Even your son's shaking his head. Everybody nowadays has heard of Bishop Gorman High School. When I was there, Bishop Gorman High School is not what you see it is now. Yeah. It's the campus my dad went to in the 60s. It was we only had 19 kids on the team.
Really?
So we had to play every position, and I loved playing it, but I was really, really good as a field goal kicker. And if looking back on it, I wish I would have had a tougher mindset to understand that, I had that mindset of I didn't like it, but I was great at it. And I had scholarships to Notre Dame and Nebraska and big schools. And yes, I got hurt. I tore my hip muscle off the bone. And
playing football,
okay. Playing wide receiver. And got hurt, lost my scholarships, and ended up going to Georgetown. Yes, Georgetown has a football team, for those that do not know. and ended up playing football for the Hoyas, and that rolled into basketball for the Hoyas. And I talk to kids all the time, and one of the things I say is the greatest thing to ever happen to me was getting hurt in high school.
Why is that?
That's the question I get right after it. If I don't get hurt, I go play football at a Notre Dame. I go play football at some big school, and my life path goes a totally different way. But because I got hurt, I ended up in the care of a man named John Thompson. And if it wasn't for John Thompson, I wouldn't be who I am today. And sorry, Coach was, God, he was a great man. Oh, he's a great man.
How'd you get to know him?
So growing up, actually, my father had a rule in our casinos. We did not allow college teams or younger teams. We didn't have, remember, Vegas was a different place also going back then. So we didn't have all the basketball tournaments and all those things. And at the time, we only had the Barbary Coast Casino. And he didn't let sports teams stay at our places. If you're a sports fan, though, if you know anything about stick and ball, you might have heard of a man named Sonny Vaccaro. Yeah. Okay, Sonny Vaccaro. Some people call him the reason that he killed college basketball, some people say. So, give you the long version since you want it. Sonny Vaccaro's brother is a man named Jimmy Vaccaro. If you follow the South Point's Twitter, Jimmy Vaccaro is in our sports book. My dad taught Jimmy how to make book. Jimmy worked for us in the 70s. Jimmy's brother, Sonny, was good friends at the time with the Georgetown basketball team. And because of Sonny, my dad made an exception and let the Georgetown men's basketball team stay at the Barbary Coast when they used to come in the 80s and do home and homes with UNLV. We're talking the Ewing era, you know. Yeah. And Sonny said, look, Michael, these guys come in and they wear suits and ties and they're well respected, you know. And so Dad made the exception because of Sonny. So my dad got to know Coach Thompson a little bit. And, I mean, look, Coach Thompson was a 7-foot tall, giant behemoth of a man. I mean, my dad's a large man. My dad's 6'1", 300 pounds. And you put my dad next to Coach Thompson, and it was like, plink. You know, I mean, this man was such a remember, I'm 5 years old, 7 years old, 6 years old, and here's this man was just such in awe of him. And so when I was a little boy, I used to go to basketball camp when I was little, and got to know the staff and that when you're a kid, you know. And there was a woman named Mary Finland who used to be on the team. She was the academic advisor, and got to know Miss Finland, got to know all the people. They'd come to town, they'd practice at Gorman, I'd go to their practices and stuff. And when I went to college, that was one of the reasons why I got to Georgetown. He told the football coach to take a look at me because I wasn't going to play football anymore after I got hurt. And the football team's how I got into Georgetown. And then coach was down to 9 players that were healthy. And he needed, if you can believe this, somebody that could keep his mouth shut.
And he talked to you.
Yeah, times have changed. Understood. But no, what he needed was an athlete that, look, at any college campus, you're going to find kids that play in the gym that could probably play ball. Yeah. Could play at some D2 places, could play it. And Georgetown was no exception. They had kids that played at our Yates Fieldhouse that were phenomenal. The problem is they're a distraction. They think they should be there. What he wanted was, I played in high school, but I wasn't great. And I went to camp since I was a kid. I mean, I could play ball, but he needed a body that would do what he was told, keep his mouth shut, and not expect to, hey, I'm here, I should be getting minutes. I would just do what I was told. Yeah. If Coach Thompson to this day told me to walk through that wall right there head first, yes, sir. You know, I would run through it, and I'd come out the other side and going, holy cow, you know, I made it. Because he never was going to hurt me, but he needed somebody that would do what he was told. So I had a role. And in the end, I really, really had a great time with that role. So that's why the greatest thing to ever happen to me was to get hurt. If I don't get hurt, I don't have John Thompson in my life like that.
You know, most people just see John Thompson as this iconic coach.
And he was.
Tell me about the John Thompson that you knew away from the court.
You know, so many memories. There's so many things that we keep personal, right? I mean, John Thompson was a very... the Hoya paranoia and all that, you know, we like to keep things in the gym, you know, they were private. But for me, look, I'm a 5'9" nothing inch tall white boy that, I'm not going to say I should have been guarding Allen Iverson, but I still will tell you I can stop him until he comes and tells you different. But to me, the stuff I learned about life, I learned I was the lone white boy on the team. I got to see some crappy things from people. I got to see some great things from people. I got to learn a whole nother side of things. And I had lots and lots of talks. I mean, look, you're in college, you're 18, 19 years old. That's when you start to learn things and mature about certain things. I come from Las Vegas. I've got my daddy is who he is, my grandfather. I've always been blessed. I've always been very lucky. People used to say, and this is public, so I'll share this. Old players, if you played for John Thompson in 1973, 1983, 1993, you know what you went through. Everybody knows what Coach, it didn't matter what era it was. Coach was the same. And a lot of the older guys have even said, boy, what'd you do to that man? Because he was pretty rough on me for a while. And looking back on it,
while you were on the court,
while I was on the team, while I was there, and people say what Coach was famous for taking young men that had never worn a suit and tie. There's famous stories of him signing players where they had to go outside because their homes had no electricity to sign these players. He's a famous story he used to tell. He went to go sign a player that they had blood on the kitchen table because his brother, they just got into a fight, so he had to, clean up the table before they sat down to sign his letter of intent. With me, it was a different thing. I needed to be taught something different. And once again, only a guy like John Thompson was going to deliver it the way he did. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this interview, doing the thing, running the businesses I run, being racing for 20 plus years. It was all, honestly, him and my father are the two biggest influences in my life. And I credit both of them equally with shaping me to who I am.
All right, so you step onto the court for the first time in practice. And here are all these guys who are very obviously destined for the NBA. And you're this 5'0" white guy from Las Vegas who played ball in high school, but wasn't that great. How did you even manage to last one practice, much less as long as you did?
Once again, many things will stay inside the Hoya family.
Okay.
Those first practices were a little rough on me, but in the end, I can give one anecdote. One of the very first practice, Joey Brown was one of our guard for the Hoyas in the early '90s. That was a great man, great young man, and I had class with Joey, and I was guarding Joey, and everybody didn't know why I was in there. And he was yelling at me and saying these things. So Joey looked at me, and under his breath, he said, just stay with me and, we'll get through this. And so I'm just kind of holding on to his jersey. I'm just following him around. I'm just playing defense. And Othello Harrington and Don Reed, these guys that played decades in the NBA, and they're setting these little light picks, elbows tucked in. And he blows the whistle, and he screams and makes all them run and makes me watch them run sprints.
Hello.
Because they were being a little too nice to me. And
I bet that went over well.
Yeah.
I bet you were well liked.
If you look at my height and you take that to a 6'7" to 6'9" or 10-inch tall human being, and you have them put their elbows up, you can figure out exactly what height my eye socket is to an elbow of a 6'7" tall man. And it matches perfectly. So after that, it was a little rougher on me, but you know what? I needed to get toughened up a little bit, but those first couple practices were a little rough, to say. It was a little rough for a while.
All right, so again, doing a little bit of research on the internet, did Allen Iverson actually break your ankle?
So I came to Georgetown from football,
with the hip.
and ankle injuries to me are like race car drivers with rib injuries.
Yeah.
All right, keep going. Well, I guess in our era nowadays, we'll leave that alone. But being a football player, ankle injuries, that's just, you set it back in, you run it out. So I already had a right ankle that was already fairly messed up. But yes, it is a true story. My sophomore year, his freshman year, before season started, he came down the court and he hit me with what he used to call the Batman. and he hit me with the Batman, and my ankle stuck out, and I had to go get it reset, and I taped it back up and came back out on the court 20 minutes later, kept guarding him, and for about 2.5 years, my ankle actually was black and blue about 6 inches up because every day you're on it every day. I never took a break on it. The only breaks I got was game days. That's my rest day.
It took a second for that to sink in. Yeah, I got you. A lot has been made of him thanking you when he was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. What did that mean to you personally?
Well, look, Alan's a gracious man. People don't understand him maybe as well as some of us in the house. He thanked everybody on that team. You know, if you go through, he thanked and he. It was very classy, which people don't. A lot of people don't think that of Allen Iverson, and unrightfully so in his real life. Rightfully so, maybe in the persona that you see him around town, but unrightfully so with those that know him well. And so it didn't shock any of us. The Dean Barrys, you know, if you listen to that speech, he credited Dean Barry with teaching him the killer crossover. Dean Barry used to and that's a true story. I mean, Dean was there. He was a walk-on with me, and Dean is the one that taught him the killer crossover. And so, you know, he credited Dean with that. He credited, you know, he thanked everybody on the team, and it was amusing timing because I'm winding down my NASCAR career, and the social media was now part of something where it wasn't when I was more of a star in NASCAR. There was no social media. All of a sudden, everybody going, he played the basketball story for me had kind of finally waned, where people were asking about it much less. Now all of a sudden, everybody's like, "Wait, the fat kid played basketball?" And I'm like, oh. So you know it was amusing, and he even got some questions about it. So it was fun. He even called me one day and was like, "Man, I'm getting more questions about you now than I ever got." So it was fun.
Now I did not know this, but I also read that your dad raced at one time.
Raced forever.
Okay.
Matter of fact, right outside this office.
How you took it up?
Well, off-road, yes.
Okay.
So it was just a family fun sport. We're sitting in an office at the South Point right now. My father's office is just behind this wall. And when you walk in the office, the first picture you're going to see is a picture of him winning the NORA 1000 in 2014. He was 74 years old, and he and I, it's the only race we ever raced together. My dad got hurt before I was started racing, and so he And so my dad started racing, or my dad got hurt before I started racing. So I never got to race with him, and that was my first ever race with my father, and we won the overall. He's been racing since the 60s. In Mexico, what I still do today, I still race the Baja races, and that's what I do, and that's what we love doing. My 9-year-old is racing off-road races already. And we grew up. Dad was racing the Mint 400. Dad was racing the Baja 500. Dad was racing the Snore 250. And we went out in the motorhome and made dirt castles. And Mom goes, "Here comes Dad." Well, the Mint 400 is 4 100-mile laps. So when Mom says, "Here comes Dad," no,
there goes Dad.
Okay, couple hours, and. So that's what we grew up watching Dad do, and that's what I grew up wanting to do for a hobby. And that's how I got into this actually at all, is it was a hobby. It was what we all did for fun. My brothers raced for fun. I raced for fun. They got to race with my dad. I didn't. And because of that, I got to drive before my brothers did, because they used to just ride with him and then went to college. He wasn't racing, so I got to drive. Won our first race ever and won the championship that first year, and kind of kept doing things until suddenly he was like, "Hey, holy cow, this might be a career."
Now, at what point did you decide to give NASCAR a shot?
So the Truck Series was founded by a bunch of off-road racers. Scoop Vessels, Jim Venable. These are the guys, Walker Evans are the guys that took this to Bill Jr. and said, "Hey, we have this idea, the California Super Trucks." And Walker was one of those guys. So when I was in college, I was racing. So I played football, played basketball, and raced in the summers. The NCAA did not count racing as a professional sport. It worked out in my favor. So I went to school, I swear, I got a degree. But when the Truck Series was founded in 95, Walker Evans was one of the founding fathers of it and one of the teams at the beginning. And we would be racing our off-road stuff, and then we'd see these NASCAR trucks come by. And when I graduated college, Walker said, "Come drive this truck." Okay.
Simple as that.
It was my boss. I mean, my boss said, "Come drive this truck." So we went and drove the truck and did really well. And we started to do Winston West from there and then build the career. But that's how we got into the NASCAR side. Was I was doing sports cars and open wheels. Yes, folks, I used to fit in an open wheel. Now there's not enough margarine in the world to do it. But so that's where I came from. I was doing sports cars. I was a road course teacher. Andy Lally even made a joke one day. He remembered that I was his instructor one day in like 1995. And Andy Lally is one of the greatest sports car drivers in the world right now, and he remembered that I was his instructor one day. I didn't even know that. Yeah. And so, that's the world I came from, and I was wanting to go IndyCar. Is what I really wanted to do is IndyCar, and that was where I wanted to go. That was what, if you were an off-road guy, you went Rick Mears, off-road guy, Pernelli Jones, off-road guy, Robbie Gordon, off-road guy. Off-roaders went open wheel, and that's what I wanted to do when the trucks were founded. Walker had these trucks, and he said, "Come drive this truck." So for me, it was great timing. Once again, timing in life is probably, just about everything. We all know the old adage, but it really is true. Timing was there, and I went NASCAR racing.
Now, had you had any conversations about IndyCar? Or?
Oh yeah, no, I've been testing some cars for some people, and I'd been driving all the formulas, Formula 4s, Formula Fords, Formula Vs, Formula Dodge, Skip Barbers, teaching for Barber, for Bondurant, all over these things. So I was trying to go IndyCar. I've been working with Tom Gloy on sports car stuff, trying to get a testing gig, trying to do these things. So I was going that route, and then it went, turn right, and next thing you know, I'm there.
Turn left.
Turn right. Damn it.
How big of a transition was it to go from off-road to pavement?
It wasn't.
Really?
An off-roader, listen, who's one of the most famous NASCAR drivers in the world? Who is arguably one of the three greatest NASCAR drivers in the history of our sport? A man named Jimmy Johnson.
You're looking for Jimmy Johnson, yeah.
Where did Jimmy Johnson come from?
Off-road.
Off-road. Yeah. Robbie Gordon is arguably one of the greatest race car drivers of our time. Robbie just has other issues that get in his way. And I love Robbie. He knows that, but Robbie can drive anything. You look at Tony Stewart, one of the greatest drivers. You look at Kyle Larson right now, the greatest driver of this era. They all came from a dirt background. Driving from dirt teaches you so many things. When I got in that car, my first test ever, I had Ron Hornaday and Butch Miller with me, and we're testing, and we're at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And I'm sitting there going, man, this thing's fun. It's time. I need the front to turn more. Butch Miller did half a lap and went, this thing's so loose he couldn't drive it. Ron Hornaday said, this thing's loose as hell. This boy, and I'm sitting there going, man, I got grip. This thing ain't loose. What are you talking about? I'll drive you loose. Come across the street where we raced the mid-400. Yeah. And so to me, it wasn't a tough transition. It was, what I had to learn was, and this is another one that I always hated, in order to finish first, you must first finish. If I heard that one more freaking time early in my career. Yeah. But it was so true. And the day that I finally learned to finish, I broke 2 ribs at a big crash in California Speedway in 1999. Yeah, big crash, California Speedway, 99. Broke 2 ribs, lost an eyebrow, lost all the hair. I didn't wear gloves, lost hair on one hand.
In a fire?
In a Winston West car, yeah. And great video, great mushroom cloud. My spotter told my father he couldn't see through the fire and smoke. He didn't know if I got out yet. A thing to not tell your mother and father, by the way, if you're a spotter of a young child. Don't put it that way. And that was what slowed me down. I had gotten poles. I was fast, but I was wrecking. I'd raced 5 races, 2 top 5s, 3 wrecks. It was like I was in it to win it or I was crashing things. And that's when I finally slowed down a little bit. And in 2000s, when I won my first Winston West championship, we learned how to finish races. And you had to go through that pain to learn it.
Well, to finish first you got. We got jokes.
Yeah. And the worst is I'm spotting for my kid now and my partner's grandson. And I actually said it the other day. He flipped his race car twice in a weekend. And I said it and I went, oh, I just said it. I totally disappointed myself.
You talked about winning the Winston West championships in 2000, 2001. How important were those years to your development?
That's that.
In NASCAR?
Listen, that nowadays these kids. I mean, hell, William Byron came from a video game. I mean, dear God. I'm just.
You're not supposed to call it a video game now.
It's a video game. I still call it a video game, but they've come so. I mean, they are. I mean, it's amazing what you can learn from them. Me, that rear view mirror camera they're using that Cup car now.
Yeah.
But to us, that's where you had to learn, right? I mean, it was a different era. You had to learn that respect. That was when you used to race to cautions. You didn't have lucky dogs. You didn't get laps back. You had to single file restarts with laps, lap down on the inside. You had to learn how to earn and gain respect, and you had to work your way through that. And so I remember all those eras. Randy Tolsma taught me one of the greatest lessons in my racing career. In 1998, 99, I'm running a truck race. I'm 18th at Mesa Marin, and I'm battling with Lance Norrick for 19th and 18th. Like, when you're in that race car, that's the world. Yeah. It's 18th and 19th freaking place. It means absolutely nothing. You're running like crap.
Yeah.
Here comes Randy Tolsma as the leader, and it's my fourth race ever. I want nothing to do with the leaders. I don't want them to know my name. I don't want them to, I don't want them to do any of that. And I point Randy Tolsma by. I slow up. I quit battling for 18th place. I let him go. Lance Norrick battles him tooth and nail, chops on him 3 times. 3 laps later, Randy's had enough of Lance, sends him off into turn 1. My crew chief is screaming, go, go, go. Randy pulls down the back straightaway at Mesa Marin and points me by. Gives me my lap back. And speeds up right after me. There's 3 other cars that are trying to get their lap back. Nope. He pointed me by and pulled in behind me to the caution flag. And I went, I think I just learned something.
Yeah.
Give that guy that respect. Yeah. My first flash forward 4 years, my first truck win was Texas Motor Speedway. I was a lap down at one point. Rick Crawford gave me my lap back by 4 inches at Texas Motor Speedway. Just barely beat him back. He lifted just enough, didn't want to give anybody else their lap back, gave me my lap back by a couple inches. I went on to win that race. I was then told that I would never get my lap back ever again if I was a lap down. Yeah. But you had to learn those then. And the other thing was, it was an inexpensive way to learn it, right? I mean, a Winston West car costs significantly less than a truck, an Xfinity car, a Cup car. So that was where you learned. You went West racing, you went Busch North racing. You learned how to wreck things. You learned how to make mistakes at a minimal cost, and then you got your chances to move up.
Now, you mentioned the accident where you...
California Speedway.
What happened?
Another guy wrecked. So we went into turn 3 at California Speedway, and a guy blew a tire. I can't even remember who it was. Was it Gary Smith? I think Gary Smith blew a tire and just clipped me and sent me into the wall, backed into the wall, and had no brake pressure. It blew the brake lines off. So I'm sitting, hold the brake and just sit on the track and wait. The problem was I spun backwards on the banking and had no brake. I started to roll down the hill, and as I rolled down the hill, 2 other guys got into it, and I went fuel cell to fuel cell with somebody. I think that was Gary Smith. And fuel cell to fuel cell in 1999, different technology, right? Yeah. I mean, poof, mushroom cloud. And so it was a big, huge wreck. I'll never forget that day. Parnelli Jones was a big part of my racing life growing up. And before I started racing NASCAR, I kind of said, hey, how did you know, Parnelli, that you didn't want to do this or you did want to? How do you know? I mean, we all want. Come on, who doesn't want to be a race car driver? Yay! But how do you know when it's like? He goes, kid. He goes, when it's time to hang it up. I go, how? He goes, when you have that big wreck, and I hadn't had a big wreck yet. Big wreck. He goes, you'll know when it happens. He goes, when you have that big wreck, and you get out of that race car, and the first thing that runs through your head is the family business. He goes, time to get out of the car. And that was a brand new race car we had just built at Walker Evans Racing. and it had that big fire, and it's destroyed. And I get out and I run across the grass, and there's a video that shows me laying in the grass. I've broken 2 ribs. I'm sitting there in the grass going, oh, that hurt. And I roll over and I look, and the car's in flames. Like, oh, that was a new race car. We're going to have to build another one. And I stopped and I went, oh, that's not the family business. I guess I got my big one, and I'm not done. So that was my another learning moment. Thanks, Parnelli Jones.
Now, what kind of injuries did you have?
Just a couple broken ribs.
Okay, all right.
I mean,
so your hands were?
No, I didn't wear gloves. I used to get yelled at all the time.
Yeah.
Always should have. Didn't wear gloves, so when the fireball, and I had my visor up. Back then, remember, some people had open faces, some wore bubble goggles. I wore full face, but my visor up 99% of the time. And I have a lot of eyebrow. And when the fire blew through, it actually took off this eyebrow and all the hair off of both my hands. And that was there was no burns. It just actually, took the hair. But as you see, me having half of one eyebrow, it's not a pretty sight.